Good evening. You're watching the news tonight, your daily roundup of all that has happened across India and the world. I'm Ishan Russell, and tonight our focus is on inflation and the index of industrial production. Both those figures are out. Now, inflation has gone up as well as industrial production, but does that mean more? Do things get more expensive? And as far as industrial production is concerned, does that mean the economy is in a better state? We'll be asking that to a special guest as well over the next half hour. But first, the headlines we're tracking right now. Retail inflation up at 5.01% in May against 4.87% in April. Industrial production grows at 4.1% in April 2015 against 2.1% in March. The garbage mess takes a political colour in Delhi. Rahul Gandhi assures party support to sanitation workers. Strike called off after High Court orders Delhi government to pay them. Aam Aadmi Party mulls action against Jitendra Singh Tomar. Party refers fake degree issue to its internal Lokpal. And despite having a law banning it, India has the highest number of child labourers. Report states that the nation will take 100 years to end this menace. A top story this evening, the index of industrial production this April has given the economy more reason to cheer. Factory output grew at 4.1% in April 2015 on the back of a better show in manufacturing. Consumer price inflation, however, edged up to 5.01% in May. Here's more.
A day after the World Bank reported that India is on the track to outstrip China's growth rate, industrial output figures for the period April-March 2014-15 showing improvement, growing at 4.1% against 2.8% in the corresponding period in the last fiscal. In April, manufacturing output grew at 5.1%, while mining clocked 0.6%. Capital goods output increased by 11.1%. However, electricity output showed a contraction of 0.5%. While the IIP revived hopes of economic recovery, retail inflation inched upwards to 5.01% in May from 4.87% in the previous month. However, retail food inflation eased a bit to 4.8% from 5.11% in April. Overall inflation stood at 5.52% in rural areas and 4.41% in the urban areas. A mixed bag for the economy. While the IIP data bodes well for the economy, the surge in inflation on the back of fears of a deficient monsoon could be a cause of concern. Priti Mishra, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, what do these figures really mean for you and me? To help us understand that, Sunil Kumar Sinha, Director, India Ratings and Research, now joins us to help us understand. Sunil, as far as these figures are concerned, inflation has inched up marginally. That's the consumer price index. And first, let's talk about that. Does that mean that things get dearer for us as consumers?
Well, certainly. I mean, inflation inching up is not a very good news for a common man. However, this kind of increase in inflation was expected, particularly because, the unseasonal rains had destroyed crops in some part of the country and also adversely impacted the vegetables and fruits. So some bit of impact of that obviously is getting reflected in that. But I guess the more worrying factor is the prediction relating to monsoon, which if it gets realized as per the IMD's projection or prediction, then inflation could really inch up from here rather than either falling or remaining at the same level. So that would be more bad news in my view.
All right, so there are a bit of worries on the inflation front, especially if the monsoon, as many are predicting that it could be a deficient one this time around. Let's see what kind of an impact that has. As far as the index of industrial production is concerned, now that's seen a significant increase from about 2.6%, if I'm not mistaken, to 4.1%. So, but does that mean that the government's initiatives as far as boosting manufacturing and boosting industrial production go, those are paying dividend?
Well, the industrial production number are certainly a welcome, change. because my own understanding was that it will not grow beyond probably around 2% in the month of April, but it has shown a substantial increase and grew at about 4.1%. So certainly that is much better than expectation, and also better than the numbers that has been coming in some of the recent past. And even better is that this growth is led by manufacturing, which has been a cause of concern for more than a year now. This government had initiated several steps, made few policy announcements also, and all of them were directed in terms of promoting manufacturing in India. Make in India is the slogan for that. So to that extent, it is certainly a good news. However, once we go beyond the aggregate number, which is 4.1%, then things are not looking up to the extent one would have expected it to be, simply because that at a more aggregate level, whereby we dissect the overall industry into three broad sectors: manufacturing, electricity, and mining.
All right.
While manufacturing has shown 5.1% growth, the electricity and mining hasn't shown. On the contrary, electricity has shown a contraction in the month of April. So to that extent,
what does this mean for the larger macroeconomic picture for India?
I was coming to that. So the issue here is that overall, yes, good news, but whether this kind of a growth will remain sustainable over a long period of time is something which one is not too sure. Looking at the disaggregated figure, because as you know, mining and electricity are part of the infrastructure sector.
Right.
And manufacturing typically requires a big support from infrastructure sector. So if that somewhere is not coming forth, then sustaining this growth momentum in the medium to long term would be still a difficult
All right,
task.
so quite a few variables at play as far as this is concerned. Mr. Sunil Sinha, thank you very much for coming in and helping us understand as far as these figures go of retail inflation and the index of industrial production. Both have increased, but both have very different connotations in terms of how they impact us and how they impact the economy of the country. Thanks very much for helping us understand that. Well, moving on now, after a meeting with the heads of public sector union banks, Finance Minister Arun Jaitley asserted that the public sector banks have assured more rate cuts in the coming weeks. Jaitley also hinted at more capital infusion into the public sector banks, besides the 7,900 crore rupees already earmarked in the budget.
There is good news for loan borrowers, as the EMIs on home and auto loans could fall soon. Public sector banks have vowed to pass on RBI rate cuts to consumers in the coming weeks. Finance Minister Arun Jaitley says banks will work out the rate cut based on their balance sheet and other factors. Since January, the RBI has cut the repo rate by 75 basis points. However, consumers have been passed on benefits only of 30 BPS.
Over the next few weeks, they would be in a position to work out greater cuts.
Raising concerns over bad loans, Jaitley also asked banks to fix their swelling non-performing assets. Jaitley said that even though NPAs had come down from 5.64% to 5.2% in the quarter ending March 2015, no inferences could be drawn from this yet.
We did ask each of the banks which has a higher NPA level to explain the reasons and those groups on account of which the defaults were higher.
Jaitley also asserted that unclogging stalled projects is high on the government's priority. He also said there would be greater investment in the agricultural sector to propel rural demand. Kriti Mishra, Rajya Sabha TV, Delhi.
On to the mess in Delhi, because it's really become a mess now. The sanitation worker crisis in Delhi, that is what I'm talking about. That's shaping up as a centre-state tussle now. The High Court today directed the Delhi government to pay the salary dues for the month of May without any delay for the sanitation workers. This on a day when Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi met the striking Safai Karamcharis in the city, assuring them of his party's help in their poor protest for their wages. The workers later called off their strike.
Amid the rising stench of garbage, a political fight is raging in Delhi. On Friday, striking sanitation workers finally called off their strike, but not before Congress Vice President Rahul Gandhi reached out to them.
बहानों से आपका कुछ नहीं होने वाला है। आपका काम जब भी होगा जब आप दिल्ली सरकार को और हिंदुस्तान की सरकार को सफाई कर्मचारी की शक्ति दिखाओगे।
At the heart of Delhi's sanitation crisis is the tussle between the ruling Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP. The government claims the BJP government at the centre has not released funds, a charge that the party refutes.
दिल्ली सरकार की केजरीवाल सरकार 2 साल के बाद जो दिल्ली नगर निगम का जो चुनाव आने वाला है उसके ऊपर केजरीवाल की नज़र है और वो इसके ऊपर बाय हुक एंड क्रुक कब्जा करना चाहते हैं।
At a hearing on Friday, the Delhi High Court warned of a health epidemic and directed the government to ensure immediate release of funds so that the East Delhi Municipal Corporation can pay employee dues for May.
आज ऑनरेबल हाई कोर्ट ने बहुत अच्छा ऑर्डर किया, बोला जी सैलरी तो आप अभी दीजिए, विद इन मंडे तक दे दीजिए आप और फ्राइडे को हमें स्टेटस रिपोर्ट दीजिए। और साथ में ये भी कहा गया कि अगर कहीं कोई ट्रेड यूनियन वाले ऑब्जेक्शन उठाते हैं, डिस्टर्बेंस करते हैं, तो कमिश्नर को डायरेक्शन दिया कि आप इनको मदद करेंगे और ये इंश्योर कीजिए कि कोई लिफ्टिंग ऑफ गार्बेज में कोई डिफिकल्टी बीच में क्रिएट नहीं करेगा।
The court was also unhappy with the government's insistence that there is no provision for the release of funds and that the government will take a decision in its assembly budget session.
सफाई मजदूर जिस तरह से भूखों मर रहे हैं, जिस तरह से उनके अधिकारों का हनन किया जा रहा है, ये इस तरह की नीति बर्दाश्त नहीं होगी।
With the MCD garbage episode, though the central government had paid all the money to the state government was playing politics over it and not releasing the money to the MCDs. Only after they have been reprimanded by the High Court that they have released the partial amount of money to the MCD. Had they released this amount a bit previously, then Delhi would not have faced what it faced today.
Meanwhile, Lieutenant Governor Najib Jung announced that 493 crore rupees will be released to the civic bodies on Friday itself to cover the dues. This was after mayors of 3 BJP-ruled municipal bodies and even the Congress requested his intervention.
आम आदमी पार्टी हो या भारतीय जनता पार्टी, ये जुमलों का सरकार, ये सेल्फी सरकार अपना काम पर आए और ये अगर इतना भी इनको शौक है सेल्फी लेने का तो कूड़ों का बैकग्राउंड लगाकर सेल्फी ले सकते हैं।
The High Court directed the Commissioner of Police to constitute specific task forces to oversee ward-wise garbage removal right away. It also restrained the associations of Safai Karamcharis from obstructing removal of garbage from dumps. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And facing major embarrassment over the fake degree row involving former Delhi Law Minister Jitendra Singh Tomar, the Aam Aadmi Party today made a face-saving bid by announcing an internal probe into the issue. The party is likely to expel Tomar once the Lokpal completes its investigation. Opposition parties, however, are not content with the Aam Aadmi Party's move and are demanding Kejriwal's resignation.
Already in deep trouble over his fake educational degrees, former Delhi Law Minister Jitendra Singh Tomar may have to resolve his legal problems all alone. If reports are to be believed, Aam Aadmi Party chief Arvind Kejriwal is miffed with Tomar for lying about his degrees, while the party is mulling his expulsion from the party fold.
पूरा मामला आंतरिक लोकपाल को दे दिया गया है। उसमें क्या-क्या तथ्य विद्यालय से, कॉलेज से और यूनिवर्सिटीज से प्राप्त होंगे, उसके लिए पार्टी भी पूरा मामला इकट्ठा करके अपने ढंग से उस पर निर्णय लेगी।
Despite the damage control effort by the Aam Aadmi Party, rivals continue to train their guns on the Delhi Chief Minister, demanding his resignation. The BJP state unit even held a protest outside Tomar's residence.
आज ये कहकर के आप इतिश्री कर लेंगे कि आरटीआई की जानकारी गलत दे दी। जिम्मेवार कौन? जिम्मेवार कौन और इसकी कौन जिम्मेवारी लेगा? क्या वो अपने पद से त्यागपत्र देंगे?
Aam Aadmi Party splinter group Swaraj Abhiyan also joined in the chorus, saying Kejriwal has lost the moral right to govern.
Totally irresponsible on the part of the Aam Aadmi Party to have continued him as law minister and for Arvind to have believed some fabricated RTI reply that he produced from his college. So this has created a very serious doubt about the claims of the Aam Aadmi Party to be a party with a difference and wedded to some ethical principles, etc.
Meanwhile, Tomar was taken to Bihar on Friday for physical verification of his degrees.
बिहार लेके जाया गया है, मेरे ख्याल में पार्टी मॉर्निंग में पहुंची है वहाँ पर, और उसके अलावा हमारी साइमल्टेनियसली जो भी इन्वेस्टिगेशन दिल्ली में आवश्यक है वो हम कर रहे हैं ताकि इस केस का जो भी रेलेवेंट एविडेंस है उसको हम जल्दी से जल्दी इकट्ठा कर सकें.
Protests broke out at the Tilka Manji University in Bhagalpur against Tomar for defaming the varsity. With Pranav Goswami, Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, time for us to take a very quick break, but coming up on the other side, all the international news. Myanmar's pro-democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi meets China's top leadership in Beijing. Details of that on the other side.
Indian Railways, for decades crying for help. A new government panel report advises a big revamp. How realistic are its suggestions? And what is the right track ahead? Watch The Big Picture at 9:30 p.m. on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back. You're watching the news tonight. Now, India holds the infamous distinction of being the top country in terms of child labor. Yes, and not child labor as in combating it, but the fact that child labor is so prevalent over here. Even as the government claims there has been a rapid decrease in the number of children employed as labor, unofficial statistics claim otherwise. A report by an NGO now says that the rate at which India is acting against the menace, it would take 100 years to end child labor.
The International Labour Organization observes World Day Against Child Labour on Friday. Millions of Indian children lead miserable lives, working long hours in inhuman conditions, all in a bid to just get by.
स्कूल जाना अच्छा लगता है, फिर मम्मी पापा को हाथ छिल जाता है, बदबू आती, फिर मम्मी पापा को मदद करने के लिए हम ये काम करते हैं.
स्कूल जाना अच्छा लगता है, फिर स्कूल जाके ऑफिस में भैया से काम मिलेगा, ऐसा काम की तनख्वाह मिलेगा तो घर का खर्चा चलाऊंगा.
And their condition is unlikely to improve anytime soon. Child labour is decreasing at a dismal rate of just 2.2% per year. Child Rights and You, an NGO that works for children around the world, has analysed India's census data to reach this conclusion. The analysis also points out to another, more dangerous trend. Child labour in urban areas of the country has increased by 53% during 2001 to 2011.
We are at a position where we want to develop as a country. I think we will have a population which will remain underdeveloped. It will have definitely a strong impact on our economy tomorrow. Also, what is going to happen is that the whole concept of childhood is going to suffer. We will not be able to give our children education today, and therefore the generation tomorrow will suffer.
The number of working children aged between 5 and 14 years old has dropped to 4.3 million in 2011 from 12.6 million a decade ago. For this number to come down further, tough laws and tougher enforcement is the need of the hour.
अगर एजुकेशन अच्छा हो तो काफ़ी इम्प्रूवमेंट हो सकता है और बाल मजदूरी ख़त्म करने का एक आसान रास्ता यही है कि हम बच्चों को अच्छी पढ़ाई दें, इस तरह की व्यवस्था करें कि बच्चे को लगे कि हमारा पढ़ना सार्थक हो रहा है, माँ बाप को भी लगे कि बच्चे की पढ़ाई सार्थक हो रही है।
Of the two conventions developed by the ILO, India has so far not ratified either. These include a convention on the minimum age for admission to employment and one on the worst forms of child labour. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
More news from across the country and nationwide now. The search for the Indian Coast Guard Dornier aircraft reported missing on Monday evening with 3 people on board continued for the 4th day today. INS Sindhudwaj, a naval submarine fitted with sophisticated sonar equipment, joined a fleet of 15 ships engaged in the search operations. However, the search team is yet to get any clue into the disappearance of the plane. Activists in Arunachal Pradesh slammed the centre's plans to build 2 dams on the Siang River. Over 40 dams have been planned on the Siang River basin that originates in the Tibetan Plateau as the Yarluk Sangpo river and flows into Assam to become the Brahmaputra. While none of the projects have taken off as of now, activists from both Arunachal Pradesh and Assam are opposing the plans. At least 14 people died while 20 others were seriously injured when a private bus in which they were travelling slid off the road and dashed against a tree in the village of Behram in Punjab. The bus was on its way from Nawashahar to Jalandhar. It was passing through a deep curve when it slid off the road and dashed into a tree. Some international news now, and Myanmar's opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi is in China holding meeting with the top leadership. Now, Suu Kyi her strategic visit comes ahead of the Myanmar's general election that is due later in November. Critics say that China is making a desperate attempt to rework the strained relations between the two countries. Aung San will conclude her visit, in fact, on the 14th of this month.
A rare meeting for Chinese President Xi Jinping with a foreign opposition politician. But in hosting Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi in Beijing's Great Hall of the People, China is keeping a strategic eye on the upcoming general elections in Myanmar. Scheduled for December, it will be the first free vote in Myanmar for 25 years.
昨天，昂山素季女士已经抵达中国访问。 全国政协副主席、中联部部长王家瑞昨天在北京会见了。
Even as the meeting was underway, an ethnic Chinese rebel group fighting the Myanmar military on the border announced a unilateral ceasefire, apparently under pressure from Beijing.
我们希望冲突双方能够保持克制，相向而行，尽快的停止冲突。 尽快的实现中缅边境地区的和平稳定和正常秩序。中方在缅北问题上的立场。
Suu Kyi's visit comes at a very critical time in the China-Myanmar relationship. Ever since the political reforms in Myanmar in 2011, relations between China and Myanmar worsened over various geopolitical issues. Suu Kyi cannot run for a president in the upcoming election, since Myanmar's constitution bars her for being married to a foreigner. But critics suggest her National League for Democracy is likely to become more powerful in the new government. And China is apparently hedging its bets by expanding its relationship with her. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, amid the looming Mediterranean migrant crisis, Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott evaded questions on allegations that an Australian Navy ship paid the crew of a migrant boat to turn back to Indonesia. Abbott, however, said his country had developed incredibly creative approaches to stop asylum boats from reaching Australia. The country's immigration and foreign ministers have denied the allegations. Migrants from Bangladesh, Myanmar and Sri Lanka were on the boat reportedly heading to New Zealand, but were held in the island in northeastern Australia. Indonesian officials expressed concern over the report. Under Australian law, no migrants or asylum seekers allowed entry into its waters. They intercepted and turned back or taken to detention facilities in the islands of Papua New Guinea. Let's now get you some more international news and updates in Global Buzz. France has formally opened an inquiry into the Germanwings plane crash. The inquiry will probe whether mistakes were made in monitoring the psychological health of the co-pilot who crashed the plane on purpose. Malaysian Airlines flight was forced to make an emergency landing in Melbourne on Friday. The landing was made due to concerns over an engine fire. The Airbus A330 aircraft MH148 was headed to Kuala Lumpur from Melbourne with 300 passengers on board. Keeping pressure on Cristina de Bourbon to give up her succession rights, Spain's King Philip VI has stripped her of her title of Duchess. The king's sister is embroiled in a tax fraud case, the trial for which will start soon. Heavy rain has caused major flooding in parts of Colorado states of the United States. In fact, streets turned into rivers in the city of Loveland, with much of the city swamped. The fast-moving waters flowed over the streets and flooded several basements as well. Time now for all the sports action in SportsBeat. The Indian world football team went down 2-1 against Oman in the home leg of the 2018 World Cup qualification round. Qasim Said and Imad Al Hussaini scored for Oman, while Sunil Chhetri was on target for India with a superb goal in the 26th minute. Sussex and England wicketkeeper Matt Pryor announced his retirement from all forms of professional cricket. Pryor made the last of his 79 Test appearances against India at Lord's 11 months ago before undergoing surgery for his Achilles tendon. He leaves the international stage with 4,099 Test runs and 256 Test dismissals to his name. Former West Indian fast bowler Wesley Hall has been inducted to the ICC Hall of Fame. Hall received his commemorative cap from fellow Hall of Famer Courtney Walsh on the opening day of the second Test between the West Indies and Australia at Sabina Park. Chile scored a 2-0 victory over Ecuador in the opening match of the Copa America. The second half goals from Arturo Vidal and Eduardo Vargas gave host Chile an emphatic victory over Ecuador. Vidal scored from the penalty spot in the 67th minute after being pulled down by Miller Bolaños before Vargas doubled Chile's lead 6 minutes from time. Well, that's the news tonight. Good night.